Hello, and welcome to this episode of Nonstop Nonprofit.
Many nonprofits struggle to deliver meaningful content in a way that engages their donor base. I mean, you can have the coolest impact story, but if it's just sitting on your website somewhere waiting for donors to come and find it, it's not truly making the impact it was designed for. If that sounds like something your nonprofit struggles with, this episode is for you. Today, we're talking to David Bowden, spoken word poet and co-founder and executive director of Spoken Gospel, a nonprofit with a mind-boggling 50 million plus engagements of their video, devotional, reading, and podcast-based content. Not to mention, they've got over 150,000 subscribers to their YouTube channel alone. I think holy moly is an appropriate response here. Plot twist: Spoken Gospel's entire content creation model requires on listening. David focuses on building individual relationships based on each member's unique interest, and it's paid off in a strong recurring program that responds to Spoken Gospel's needs and asks alike. Sure, David's got the greatest story ever told to help guide Spoken Gospel's content story, but making the content itself approachable and relevant is key to attracting the type of audience and donor that sticks around for the long term. Listen in, this is going to be a great conversation.
It is your number one priority to ensure that your business can continue to deliver on its mission, whether it's this year, next year, and beyond.
So we're creating this inclusive environment, building between diverse communities to ensure that our young people can thrive.
I'm always so baffled when I do webinars. There's always somebody at the end who raises their hand and says, I'm the development director. Should I have access to the budget? I'm always like, yes, you've got to know that.
The best thing you can ever do as a nonprofit leader is spend as much money as possible on your story.
Then you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
That is unacceptable, and that is not the way to run a board.
The best thing that we can do is just raise as much money as possible and then give it to the people around the world.
If you're going to be sustainable, you have to have a multi-channel strategy to reach all of these different generations of donors however they want to be reached.
One of the principal values that we carry as an organization is to lift grace over guilt. And we believe that grace is the greatest agent for change that anyone can ever experience.
We all need each other in terms of other nonprofits working together to solve things.
The more nonprofits can give their donor base that experience of the impact that's being made on the ground level, there's nothing else that you have to give someone. This is Nonstop Nonprofit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Nonstop Nonprofit Podcast. This is your host, David Schwab, and today we have my friend David Bowden, not to be confused, with us, the founder and CEO of Spoken Gospel. David, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely, David. Glad to be here. Always good to meet another David.
All right. Well, I'm very interested and excited about this episode, David. I've been keeping an eye on your organization ever since I was introduced about a year ago, actually now, keeping an eye on what you guys do, inspired by not only the movement that you're bringing, but also inspired by the way you're changing the way to deliver your message, your mission, but also changing the way you approach fundraising. And those are two things that I'm really interested in just talking about and bringing back to our audience today, because I think there's going to be some really cool insights, because, a big conversation in the sector right now is how do we reach the next generation? But more than that, who is the next generation? Who's the next generation we're serving, and who's the next generation supporting us? But before we get in too deep, I'm going to just start off, give the audience a chance to get to know you. So please introduce us to yourself. Obviously, you started Spoken Gospel. How long has Spoken Gospel been around? What was it like starting a brand new organization? And, was that your first foray into the nonprofit sector? Had you been in other organizations before that?
Yeah, man, lots of cool questions. So it was not my first foray into the nonprofit space. Right out of my undergraduate degree, I started another nonprofit called Give a Goat. And we gave goats to poor families in the Philippines to help them reach self-sufficiency through like agriculture and stuff like that. And that went great. And we ended up giving it away to another parent organization that was doing other work in the Philippines so I could move on and kind of spent almost a decade after that traveling and speaking. I do something really strange called spoken word poetry, which some people are either like, oh yeah, I've totally seen that, or they give me like deer in headlights looks and have no idea what I'm talking about. And was able to do that, was able to publish a couple of books through a HarperCollins imprint. And about in 2017, started to realize that I was kind of taking a shotgun approach to life and what I felt like my calling was, and wanted to really focus in on one thing. And through some time of discernment, that led me to what is now Spoken Gospel. So at the end of 2017, decided that there was like a whole bunch of things in my past that all lined up in one direction. And so we were like, man, wouldn't it be really cool if we could have like a media nonprofit that created free resources that help people work through this really difficult book called the Bible, and help them see how all of it in varying ways pointed to the person of Jesus. And if it was beautiful, if it was artistic, if it was modern, and what if we gave it all away for free? Was this idea. And so we started doing that. I started like recruiting some people that I felt like should be involved. And we had some crazy moments where people were quitting dream jobs to come join the team. We raised our first round of funding through an awesome major donor foundation, and got to work in 2018, released our first video in 2019. And over the last 4 years, we have had over 50 million significant engagements with our free resources. And it's been nuts. And so we've got about 20% left of the Bible to finish covering with our resources. And then we'll be done with our first brush of the project.
Man, so what's that? We're 6 years, 6 years to get through phase one. That's a long time to be dedicated to a single task.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely been a lift, but it's been a ton of fun the whole way. We've learned a lot, and how we approach things at the beginning, they've definitely changed, especially as the team's grown. We've brought in more specialized and talented people. So it's been awesome.
That kind of sparks right into my next question is, now sitting on the other side of a global pandemic where everything is virtual and everything is video first. Before that, thinking 2017, 2018, no one was really thinking video content first, or digestible, engaging virtual content. What was it like approaching that in a world that prioritized physical engagement, specifically thinking on the ministry side too? How was it starting an organization and starting something that now makes total sense, but then probably felt different or foreign or a little off?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't know if we felt like we were doing that because, we're digital natives, kind of as kind of mid-millennials. And we were just like, what we wanted to do was, reading the Bible is really hard. It's, it's a discipline that even a lot of Christians struggle with. And we were like, we don't want to make people read a whole bunch of other stuff before they're trying to read the Bible, because then it's just like reading on reading. And we're like, man, people are digesting content through video. It's like, oh, I want to know how to fix a tire. What do? I look up a YouTube video on how to fix a tire, right? I want to know how to make paella. Oh, I look at a YouTube video. I'm not going to, we're not reading menus or recipes anymore. And so the difference, though, came in how we position ourselves before and after the pandemic. Before, I had to explain that. I had to say like, and I had to give stats. I was like, most people engage content through video. It's the fastest growing platform. It's where education happens. Here's the benefits of video education, blah, blah, blah. And now I don't have to qualify that anymore. People more quickly understand the value that's brought from that, because they were forced into a position where they were doing Bible studies in their homes with their families. They were trying to like send resources to church members or stuff, and they needed it to be digital. They needed it to be video, and it really helped if it was free. And so now that just makes sense. It's more the water we swim in now.
Yeah. So I want to, double click into that a little bit, because what you were talking about is something that I think is so critical. Is you saw the trend that the next generation of consumer, for lack of a better term, was going. Like you said, the next generation of the people that we want to serve at our organization are digital natives, right? what do digital natives do that are different from their previous generations? Well, they're consuming content. They're going, like, their first place to search for something is YouTube. It's not Google. Now we're even pushing that further and saying the first place people search, the next generation, the first place they search is TikTok or Instagram. They don't even go to Google or YouTube anymore. Oh, that's a different topic for a different time and maybe a different generational podcast host. But like you said, look, I'm recognizing the difference here. And I think it's so important to recognize that, like, hey, you recognized a difference, and to be able to approach that difference, you started something totally different. But how would you recommend, or how would you approach, like, if you were part of an organization that, you know, has been around 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they've got some deeply ingrained processes, they think they know who they're talking to, and they're like, I need to go reach this next generation, maybe not next generation of donor, but like, I don't want my services to stop being useful or stop being found just because we're communicating to an older generation. How would you recommend someone in that seat starting to think about or figure out where that next generation is and how to start producing content or things for their needs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a big question. I think that we weren't trying to reach the next generation. That wasn't our goal. We were trying to create resources that did two things. One, that gave us an outlet to explore and express everything we were learning about a different way to read your Bible. And we were just dying to get that information out. And I process when I create. And so, like, I've written a couple books now, and the reason I wrote them was I was like, I need an excuse to study this for a year and write about it, like, because I just need to process. And so in the same way, I was like, this new different way to read your Bible is so interesting to me. I really want to explore how to do that. And the other thing was, I want to make stuff that I want to watch and that my friends want to watch. And so we were making it for us, and, like, you know, we were like, if we'll enjoy it and if we will ingest it, then other people should too. So that was like a big thing. So in the situation you set up with the, like, more like old hat kind of organization that has standard practices and, like, has a way of doing things, and they're trying to reach a different generation, I would probably bring those kinds of people in and say, how are you engaging with this kind of mission, you know, and get them to be a part of the conversation and create with them, not for them, I think would be a really helpful way to do that. Because that's what we did. We made with our generation, you know, and that made it for our generation.
Right.
And I think there's just also the idea, but it's a little different because we're a content organization. Like, our exempt purpose is to make stuff, you know? And so it's a little different because you might be talking about fundraising materials or, you know, things like that when it comes to how to engage a different generation. But for us, we're just like, man, if you just make something that's good and that you like watching, it stands to reason that others will too. The one other thing that really influenced how we got where we are now in terms of our approach with video, it being live action instead of animation, having a diversity of presenters instead of one presenter, kind of defraying the celebrity culture that's very prevalent inside of American evangelicalism. Like, all of that was done because of relationships that we had with partners and other people in our industry. So we learned the most by partnering with people who I think traditionally would be seen as competitors, but we saw them as collaborators. So people who literally, a donor might choose to give to this organization instead of us, but we don't care because if we work closer together, we're both going to get better. And so we learned a ton by working with people who literally have our same mission and we would share donors with. But by doing that, we created a better resource and different distribution partners because we weren't afraid to partner with competitors. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that response, but I'll start with, you know, just what you talked about there is working with your competitor, right? That feels strange to say, but in the nonprofit sector, it really is true. And I can, you know, relate that back beyond just from a ministry perspective. Like, I got my career started in fundraising, and when I was starting, we called it network fundraising, where you worked with a, you know, local organization that has a delivery process that's very common all across the country. And so you're able to get economies of scale. So we did this with food banks and homeless shelters and organizations like that, where we could say, okay, yes, the way you deliver is unique. The way you work is unique, and your audience and the people you serve are unique, but also the fundamental way that you're delivering your service is the same. And when you work together, you're able, and this was in the context of fundraising rather than delivering content, but very similarly, when you work together, even though sure you might be vying for the same donor dollar, you're also able to exponentially grow the way that you're able to impact the people you're serving, which is ultimately the goal. The reason that your organization is there in the first place is to deliver more value to the people you're serving. And so I love that you touched on that and talked about how, like, you went to organizations that would have traditionally been seen as competitors. And I think those organizations probably valued the fact that you were coming to them to learn and to collaborate.
Yeah. And we've made, I mean, those are still like our best friends and best like partners, even though we are technically competitors. We've both increased in like our excellence, our reach, because we're working together. And I think you have to, especially in the nonprofit space, we have to get comfortable with, are we trying to fix a problem, address an issue, or are we trying to grow a brand or a company? And it's like in the nonprofit space, we're trying to fix something that's broken. And if other people are doing that too, we should not see them as competitors. They're doing the same mission as us. Let's do it together. I think is so important.
Right. Partners in a mission.
Partners in mission. And in my experience, that has only increased people, like donors' trust in what we're doing. Like we've not suffered financially because we've been generous with others. Like that's just, I don't think that's how the world works. So it's been really good for us.
Yeah. I think conventional wisdom tells us we need to be stingy or protective of our resources. But more and more, I'm seeing the more generous, the more that you can give away, the more that you can let go and deprotect. That's probably a wrong word. But the more that you can let go of your resources and the more that you can give away, whether it's to the people you serve, to your customers, or to other organizations that are doing maybe the same thing you are, the more success you're going to have. It reminds me of another guest we had on the podcast a few weeks ago, Beth Fisher from Meltrotter Ministries. They are starting this style where, they had several, for lack of a better term, competitors in and around their organization. And they looked and said, what would a for-profit company do if they were working and vying for the same market share with organizations that did something relatively similar? So in this case, a donor would choose, I'm going to go here or here. They started looking and go, well, we're all doing the same thing. And we all offer complementary but progressive services to the people we actually intend to serve. So why don't we just work together under one umbrella? So that way the donor doesn't have to choose between us or them. So a little different than what you're doing, but also it reminded me of what they're doing there. So I think that's really cool.
Yep. Also very similar though. Like we're even, those relationships are moving into exploring that. Like, have you heard of the term Collective Impact Alliance?
I haven't heard of the term, but I think it's probably what we're talking about.
Yeah. And it's like, man, let's not make people choose. Like we're doing the same thing. Let's do it together. And let's let donors give to one big problem that lots of organizations are trying to solve. So like we're exploring that with friends right now.
That's really cool. That may be, I may have you back as you're exploring that just to unpack that specific idea and how that's working. But I don't think we have the time for that today. You created content that you wanted to produce, that you wanted to consume, to reach the type of people that you wanted also to consume your content because they needed it just like you needed it. Reminds me of a story one of our founders, Justin Wheeler, always tells. Before he was the founder of Fundraise, he had started a couple nonprofits, and one of them being an organization that had a predominantly teenage donor base, which is strange in the world of fundraising because the predominant donor is 65 plus. And at that time, it was like 65 plus direct mail. I'm going to write a check to give to your organization. And when he was doing this, their primary donor ended up being, 15, 16-year-old high school students. And he geared everything he did at that organization to feel like a grassroots effort that was ownable by that audience. And so you talking about how you produced the content that you wanted to consume and having that be what became valuable to your audience reminded me of that story of how he built his effort naturally around the people that he wanted to invite in. And I promise I'm making a point with this, but something that I've been mulling about a lot as we make the shift from maybe, content management to thinking about fundraisers is inviting your donors into the fundraising process. Like what you were talking about, inviting the people you want to reach into your content production process. But thinking about donors specifically is inviting donors into the fundraising process. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to unpack this a little with you. Like, how would you approach thinking it from this way? Like if you wanted to produce a fundraising appeal and you wanted it to be valuable for your donors, what would you do? How would you approach engaging donors in a way to produce a fundraising appeal that felt natural and felt authentic to them?
Yeah, I think the question is aiming towards a specific kind of answer. And it's like, I almost have to redirect the question itself a little bit to say, what do my donors find valuable? And I don't even like calling them that. Like there are partners in making this happen. So it's like, what do they find valuable right now? What are their desires? Why do they care about spoken gospel? Why do they care about this mission? Why are they giving? And listening to them and understanding what they find valuable. And, usually that's what we find valuable too. And it's like, that's where, if you got the Venn diagram of what we and our mission are focused on and what our partners and donors are focused on, and you do an overlap, that center is what I would base our appeals around, because people will give to what they're passionate about. And so much of our donor base are just people using our resources. And we hear the story of I started using your resources and it was feeding me and, my spiritual walk so much that I decided I should probably give back since you guys were giving so much to me. And that's the relationship. And so I think we would want to build a fundraising appeal around what's going to add value to our partners' lives. And they're on mission too in their life. They're on mission. How do we help them be on mission with us? And so we often we just had to redo the website. We've got a big project coming up with the Bible app YouVersion for Holy Week, the 8 days leading up to Easter. And we're going to start experiencing tens of thousands of new users coming to our website, and our website wasn't built for that. And so we've had to redo it. And that came with a price tag that was kind of outside of our annual budget. And so what I did was I thought about people in our already giving community that are passionate about missions, evangelism, technology, things like that I know that they care about great websites. I know that they care about server-side tracking. I know that they care about cybersecurity. I know that they care about, bringing people who don't typically read the Bible into a good Bible reading experience. And I reached out to 7 people and just told them the need. And the whole website budget was funded in 2 days because it's a story they care about. And we had that story. And I just talked to them as individuals. I didn't send a mass email. And I'm talking about we had to do a pretty big raise, but I didn't do a mass email. I didn't do a big campaign. I talked to people, face to face, video chat, and it's that kind of knowing who you're partnering with, speaking to them directly and bringing them into a mission that they're already passionate about, I think is what the whole mission donor relationship should be like. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I view things.
That is exactly the perfect answer to a question, to the question I was asking. And it reminds me, my friend Andrew Olson, he now is with a new organization, and he's been in the fundraising space for so long, decades in the fundraising space, and has continued to run into issues with doing what you were doing. Hey, as an organization, we have a chance to do something once in a lifetime opportunity for our organization, but we need to be able to scale to reach the impact. Oh, but it's not in our annual budget, so we're just going to let it go away. Or it's going to that budget comes from a different vertical, so I'm not going to spend my time investing in it, even though it's ultimately going to pay dividends for the people we serve and for our organization. And so he started his entirely different type of agency specifically to help organizations do what you were just talking about, authentically building relationships with donors. Yeah. And I think it's so cool to hear you talk about that and how you were able to, one, know your donor base well enough, or your support or your partner base well enough to know hey, I can go invite these handful of partners into what we're about to do with a relatively high degree of confidence that we can deliver on what we need to do because I know they're passionate about this. So I'm gonna ask a probing question here. How have you prioritized building those relationships with donors? So when you faced this type of big challenge that you had no way to foresee, you knew who to go talk to.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and the answer is we don't take our partners for granted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when people give to us financially, so often I'm sending them an email. As the executive director, I'm sending them an email, and it's usually a video message that I'm sending, thanking them, and then sending them a little Calendly link to set up a meeting if they want to chat. I want to hear their story. I want to know why they gave. I want to know, what they like about Spoken Gospel, what they wish was better. And that feedback loop is so important. And then I actually get to know the people that are making my job and the accomplishment of this mission possible. I think like if you don't have that priority as a fundraiser, or in my case, as the leader of a nonprofit, something's probably off, because it's like those are the people that are making it possible. They're on mission with you, and you need to treat them somehow as part of the team. And you have to have a feedback loop. You have to know why they gave, like what they want to see happen, or else you're never going to be able to be responsive enough to be able to make those kinds of asks. And you're not honoring them as a person and as a donor. It's like another just number across your screen. So I think for me, it's just like honoring the human on the other side of the gift is really, really important. And it's only ever improved our mission. We've learned so much about what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. We've realized that, oh my gosh, so many of our donors are actually coming through our podcast, not through what we spend more of our budget on, like our big video introductions, although more donors come from there. But we're like, oh my goodness, so many of our most passionate donors are podcast listeners that don't really watch the videos. Man, we need to make sure they feel honored and seen and know that what they're contributing to. And we wouldn't have known that without having conversations and without learning about people's past and passions. I'm not going to know that they would really love to invest and have the opportunity to invest in a new website. But when they're presented with that, they're like, center of my bullseye, thank you, because they are on mission too, and they want the opportunity to do that. So to answer your question shortly, high priority on knowing our donors is what sets that kind of success up.
Understanding and knowing that there is a human behind a gift is making a difference to your organization.
Go figure. Yeah.
Man, it connects. I've been saying this for years, is that it is time in the nonprofit sector that like we can no longer look at donors as an ATM. Donors are investors, and they're not like, at some point in an organization's life cycle, sure, your donors may be giving specifically because of who you are or who they know. Like they may be investing in you. But there is a threshold that every organization reaches in their growth where, and you want it to be this way, your donor is not giving to you. They're not giving, like a donor is not giving to Spoken Gospel. They're giving to your mission. If your mission, if you're a homeless shelter, they're giving to get that person off the street for that night. If you're a food bank, they're giving to feed that family for a month. If you're a humanitarian relief organization, they're giving to impact the people who have been who have been impacted by that disaster. If you're a ministry, they're giving to share the message that you have with your audience. And I think it's so incredible to hear the fact that you as a leader and you as an organization have taken the big first step in prioritizing not just the understanding that they're investing in your mission and giving to your mission rather than to you, but also taking the time to understand who they are and what they care about. So that way you're able to turn around and go, hey, we have this really awesome opportunity. We can't do it unless we have people like you lean in. And I know you care specifically about this thing. Like I can probably count on 2 fingers the number of organizations I know that could call someone up and say, hey, I know you care about cybersecurity and I need funding for this because we have this really big, awesome project. Yeah. To know your donors that intimately, to know your partners that intimately is really cool.
And what's amazing about that is you also get to actually treat them as full people. So like it allows you to not just come to them when you need money. Like we go to people when we need advice in their area of expertise, right? When we need them to like check out how our servers are set up for international distribution, or like, any number of
Right.
needs you might have. It's like you have people inside of your donor pool that have more to give you than money, and they wish you would ask them, and they wish you knew them, because they want to contribute their skill and their individual giftings and passions to what you're doing. But if you don't know them, they'll never have that opportunity, because you'll never know to ask for it in a mass appeal. It's not until you're in dialogue with somebody that you're like, wait, you're really good at that? Oh my gosh, we have this huge problem. Could you help us? And that's when people stop feeling like an ATM, is when you stop just asking them for money, but inviting them to be on mission with you. Not just through like your narrow volunteer program, but through like a holistic understanding of who they are. And this isn't rocket science. Like, it's just having a 15-minute phone call with someone,
Right.
Like, it's not hard. It's just, you have to prioritize it, and you have to see that it's valuable in order to make that jump.
Yeah. What you're talking about a lot reminds me again of another podcast. We just had a guest, Erica Carley from Chive Charities. She has embedded this culture there where, very similarly, donors are people. And the priority number one is understanding why a donor partners with the organization, and then giving them a chance to tell their story and be thanked and be heard and be seen. I'm going to put you on the spot, and you may not have this number right on off the top of your head, but do you know what your donor retention rate is right now?
Yeah, right. I think we're a younger organization. We're not even 5 yet, but I think we're at 2 years and 3 months right now.
So the majority of your donors have been with you at least half, or just about half of the time your organization's been around, which is, that's phenomenal. Because where I was going with that is, Erica has led Chive Charities to a point where they have, like a 98, 99% donor retention rate, which is just unheard of in an industry where good is 50%.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And the only way to break the downward cycle that the industry is in, is understanding this critical fact that donors are people, and they're investors,
so true.
and they want to be part of your mission, and they may not have the time, the talent, or the resources to do what you do, but they have a way to invest in the end cause.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what else to add to that. It's just true.
Yeah. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, dig in a little deeper on fundraising, because I know you talked a little bit about, how you founded, you got some major donors and foundations to invest early on. You've grown now, you're doing some more of that like mass market style fundraising. I know you guys are starting to get into that. But one of the things that I found really interesting is that before you went from major donor and foundation straight into mass market, you prioritized building a pool of recurring givers, monthly donors, or reliable recurring givers. Was this an intentional choice, or did that just kind of fall in place for you guys?
Yeah, it was extremely intentional. We actually had a completely different funding model before we launched our first video. And it was in talking with one of these organizations that I told you about that people would see as a competitor. And they gave us a whole day with their executive leadership team and their chairman of the board, because we're very similar, media, Bible, like very similar organizations. And they gave us a whole day to just ask questions and learn best practices. And one of the things they pushed on was our funding model. And they showed us the success they had just by giving everything away for free, and then offering people the opportunity to help fund the studio, basically monthly recurring giving. And so we left that meeting changing everything. And so we moved into, our public launch with, please consider becoming a monthly donor to help us continue to release this stuff for free, as our primary call to action, because it just democratizes and empowers average, ordinary people to be a part of something bigger than themselves. It's how we process even spending money now, and I know we probably have monthly withdrawal fatigue at this point with Netflix and internet and everything coming out. But for a lot of us, we often think about it. Okay, what does that cost a month is now kind of how we think about things. And so it also just kind of fits that like cultural mindset too with how we think about our
subscription
finances.
mindset.
Right, totally. And I think even in the ministry, like in the ministry world, the Christian space, people are used to giving monthly to their church or something like that. And so it fits. So there's like a paradigm for it. We're used to it. And I think it also just allows like a flexibility for a lot of our partners when they want to, like, they need to pause for a month or two if something bad happens and they need to recover. It's not like they made this huge upfront investment and they're like, and then life happens. And so we've seen that be really helpful for them too. But yeah, it was an extremely intentional decision, and we've been thrilled with, how that's happened. And we've tried to create a goal for X% of our budget we want to be from monthly giving. And then when we hit it, then we allow our budget to grow again through like a major foundation gift or something. And then we start to try to grow our crowd of monthly donors along with that. And that's kind of how we plan to grow over time.
That's very interesting. How, as a leader in an organization, how has it felt having that foundation of reliable funding as you've been dreaming about the future of your organization?
It's invaluable. It's just like because it's not like, again, yes, on one hand, it's amazing to know, with a good degree of confidence that you've got X amount coming in month over month, year over year. And it's not like, man, I hope that one foundation doesn't pull out or everything goes away. So that's huge. And that's irreplaceable. The other side of it, though, is it's amazing. What gives me more confidence is not the monthly gifts that come in. It's that I know that there's hundreds of people inside of that group that when the bottom falls out, or if something terrible happens, or if an amazing opportunity comes, we're able to go to them and say, help, or, hey, check this out, or, help us process this. Like we lost our second largest donor at the end of last year because they had a financial downturn. So their foundation had to cut a lot of their giving. And all we did was, and we're talking six figures, and all we did was we went to our monthly donors. We presented them with the real problem, and they showed up and helped us cover that. And it's like, so because they're people that are in with us in the mission. So it's not even just like this financial safety net, although that is huge. And I talk to them every month through a video, and we call them the backbone of our organization. Like it holds everything together. But it's also just that relational network that is just irreplaceable. I just love being on mission with them because they're just amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. Not just a reliable source of funding, but a veritable army of reliable supporters and people who are fully vested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. My last section here, last question for you. So you talked a lot, as we focused in a lot of, when you started Spoken Gospel, how you had a chance to sit with organizations who did what you've done, or who are already doing what you wanted to do, maybe in a little bit of a different way, but you got to go seek that counsel. Let's go the other way. Like you're 5 years in, you've been doing this for a while, you've had a lot of success, you've made a lot of mistakes. If you were sitting down with yourself now in that same capacity, like a new founder or someone who has a dream for an organization, what are 2 or 3 things you would say, like, hey, if you're going to go this route, you need to be aware of this, or you need to think about that? Like in the same way someone was like, hey, you guys need to prioritize recurring giving to have a sustainable foundation. What are those 2 or 3 things you would say, like, hey, if you're thinking about starting an organization today, here's what I would strongly recommend you, like, stage 1 do?
Yeah, I definitely would tell them that from day one, they need to be treating their donors like people, because I think that was something we had to learn, and we would have gained so much more insight and would have brought people along the journey so much better, that we would be farther along than we are now had we not felt like we had to just treat them like donors. Because it wasn't that we didn't want to engage them. We didn't know that we should or how to do it. And so I think just knowing, like, hey, hop on the phone at least once every 6 months with every one of your monthly donors and just talk to them and just hear why they give, hear what they're passionate about, hear if there's anything else they wish they could contribute to the team and they can't yet. Like, talk to the people who are supporting your mission, I think would be the number one bit of advice that I would give. And then I think the other thing that I would talk about is find your mission, like really clearly what exactly you're trying to do, and do it just extremely well. If you're going to build a well, in Africa, make sure it has the quality, the longevity, the accessibility, the political climate, everything around it that needs to actually happen to make that well sustainable and long lasting. And then show people that well, right? People want to know that what you're doing is the best and that what you're doing is really good. And so for us as a content organization, it's a little easier where it's we're just trying to make really good content. We're trying to, kind of have these, what would be seminary level, teachings on a really basic level that any Christian can understand. And that is what has made us really fun to work with other organizations, is just because what we're doing is good. It's good stuff. And so I would just say talk to your donors, and whatever your mission is, do it really stinking well. Just be excellent at it. If you're going to open a food pantry, make it the coolest food pantry ever. And then I think the third would be open up a feedback loop. Make sure you have a feedback loop with your end user, who you're serving. Make sure you're hearing from them if what you're making is valuable, because we did that way too late in the game. And some of the stuff we're doing now, I wish our original resources had benefited from that feedback. It would have made it better. So just open up that feedback loop really early on and you'll improve.
Awesome. So 1, treat donors like people, invite them into your mission. 2, know what you're about and stay focused to that, so you know what to say yes to, but more importantly, what to say no to. And 3, coming back to number 1, open up a feedback loop. Treat your partners as people, learn what's working, learn what's not, and be able to move and be nimble. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, David. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I've learned a lot. I've really enjoyed our conversation here. If our audience wants to learn more about you or Spoken Gospel, is there, other than, spokengospel.org, is there a good place for them to go check out or learn more?
Yeah, I would say, we're actually a .com. So spokengospel.com is a great place to go. And then if anyone out there is a Bible reader, most likely it's possible you probably have the Bible app on your phone from our friends at YouVersion. And if you don't have that, I would download that app. It's free. Everything on it is free. It's amazing. So the Bible app, just search for Bible in your app store and download it. It's amazing. Lots of free reading plans, lots of free videos. And we put our reading plans and stuff like that on there. And it's probably the easiest way to work through our content book by book is on their platform, which again is one of those people who should be competitors, but we just see them as collaborators. We want you to use them and support them. And so, those would be the 2 places.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, David. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to this episode of Nonstop Nonprofit. This podcast is brought to you by your friends at Fundraise, nonprofit fundraising software built for nonprofit people by nonprofit people. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can find me on LinkedIn or text me at 714-717-2474. And don't forget to get your next episode the second it hits the internets. Find us on your favorite podcast streaming service, hit that follow button, and leave us a review to help us reach more nonprofit people like you. See you next time.